Motivation, the complete guide to motivation. Motivation. Have you ever felt something bigger inside of you rushing out? Sometimes you can feel the presence of something incredible in yourself, can't you? Some kind of inner voice that encourages you to do something really important in your life. When you act on it, it's like you become a completely different person. You feel like a god in a human body. You are brave and fearless. You are determined. You are invincible. But soon reality sets in, and all those moments become only history. Where did that powerful inner voice go? Have you suffered from delusions of grandeur? It is not difficult to temporarily return yourself to that emotional state of strength and power. Just go to some self-motivation training. Or, for example, turn on your favorite music with a fast rhythm, stand up straight, take a deep breath, straighten your shoulders. Then walk around, feel like a superhero. Shout something encouraging, like, yes, yes, and so on. Hit your chest a couple of times for more effect. You will look like an idiot, but it really works. But over time, emotional motivation disappears. Your great ideas seem unrealistic to you. How many times have you been consumed by an idea like, I want to start my own business, and then a week later it was forgotten? At the very beginning, you were absorbed in ideas, but you never managed to maintain that level of motivation in order to implement them. So how to achieve a high level of motivation and not lose it? Emotional motivation. American coach and writer Tony Robbins believes that wealth management is the key to motivation. This means creating appropriate conditions that allow you to feel in a certain way, using special techniques, such as anchoring. Anchoring is the process of associating an internal response with some external stimulus so that the response can be quickly, and sometimes covertly, reproduced. Anchoring can be visual, e.g., certain hand gestures, auditory, certain words or tone of voice, and kinesthetic, hand or shoulder touches. When Tony hits his chest while talking, he activates the anchors that were previously associated with a certain condition. In order for such people to maintain their emotional motivation at the right level, it is necessary to periodically restore the established anchors. This involves a huge amount of hitting yourself in the chest. Tony also offers another method of motivation, writing down all the pleasant and unpleasant sensations that you may have in the process of performing any action. The main idea in this case is the same, the excitation of the necessary emotions. This kind of motivation is usually temporary, even though the associated emotions can be strong. I have studied and practiced these types of emotional motivation quite deeply, and find them not effective enough in the long term. The logical part of my mind was ultimately unhappy with attempts to stimulate motivation at the expense of emotions. The fact is that the effect of motivational training usually lasts no more than 2 to 3 days, and then the emotional upsurge fades and you return to your normal state. You can listen to hundreds of motivation coaches and experience an unstable emotional state, but it does not persist. I think this is especially noticeable for people with a technical mindset. We are trained to think with our heads. We are still emotional to some extent, but our emotional detectors periodically clear the brain of everything that does not fit into our logic. Intellectual motivation. I was disappointed when, after some time, my emotional attitude did not lead to anything. Ultimately, I realized that being controlled by the intellect and not by the emotions is not so bad. I just needed to learn how to use my mind as an effective motivator. I stopped using emotional motivation techniques and decided to see if I could motivate myself intellectually. I thought that if I didn't feel motivated to achieve a certain goal, there was probably a logical explanation for it. Maybe I didn't use my logic enough to find it. I noted that when I had good intellectual reasons for doing something, I usually had no problem doing it. I am motivated to do regular exercise because it is reasonable. I don't need to emotionally motivate myself to go to the gym. I just do it. But when my mind thinks that the goal is wrong to some extent, I usually stop. I eventually realized that this was my mind's way of telling me that this goal was fundamentally wrong. Sometimes the chosen goal seems logical on a certain level, but if you look deeper, it becomes clear that it is unreasonable. Let's say you work in sales and set yourself the goal of increasing your income by 20% by becoming a more effective salesperson. This seems reasonable and reasonable enough. But you may be surprised when various internal blocking will interfere with the achievement of the goal. Theoretically, you should feel motivated, but it just isn't there. Perhaps the problem is at a deeper level. Your mind is aware that you do not want to work in sales at all. In fact, you want to become a musician. And it doesn't matter how hard you push yourself in your sales career. You can never convince your brain to give up on your more important dream of becoming a musician. When you set too modest goals, you experience a constant lack of motivation. Use any technique of emotional motivation, but you will only lose time. Deep down in your mind, you know the reason. You just need to find the strength to admit your true desires. Then you will need to tackle the problem of indecision and overcome what caused you to set insignificant goals. You don't have to try to outsmart yourself if you want to be consistently motivated. It's funny, but the most effective way to get motivated is to set goals that scare you away. I recommend working on these types of internal blocking in your diary. Enter a question such as, "Why don't I feel motivated to achieve this goal?" Then type in all the answers that come to mind. You will often find that the reason for your internal blockages is the modesty of your thinking. You let your fears, excuses, and limiting statements hold you back. Your subconscious mind is holding you back, so it won't give you motivation until you have the courage to face your fears and realize your true desires. When you are free from excuses, then you will experience self-motivation at its fullest. When I use this process myself, I discover new goals that seem unreasonably large. I admit that I want them, but I feel unable to achieve them. Regardless, when I eventually step over myself and set goals that are outside of my comfort zone, somehow I start to feel highly motivated and mobilize all sorts of unforeseen opportunities to help myself. Was it unreasonable to set a goal of reaching 1 million visitors a month without spending money on ads? Initially, I thought so, but for myself, I set such a goal even before this site was launched, because this idea inspired me. Smarter goals had no motivating effect on me. Now that I've reached my goal, my next goal is to get 10 million monthly visitors. Is it reckless? Maybe. But somehow it really motivates me. It seems counterintuitive that motivation can be highest when setting goals that are outside of your comfort zone. We may need to set big, challenging, and audacious goals for ourselves in order to feel truly motivated. Modest goals are not sufficient to trigger motivational energy. If we think that the goal is too simple, we do not use all our internal resources. It is only when we set unreasonable goals for ourselves that our inner resources, such as motivation and drive, are able to activate. Articles on the topic of motivation.